Hello, happiness abounder, and welcome back. Today, as we continue our discussion about perfectionism, I want to really highlight how perfectionism can hold you back. Because it really can. And this is the paradox of perfection. We think that if we are perfect, we will move forward in leaps and bounds. But truth be told, every time that we strive for perfectionism in a negative sense, it does nothing but hold us back. And here's what I mean by that. If everyone did everything perfectly, like really perfectly, not perceived perfectly, would they be relatable? I guess not everyone, but if someone in your life did everything absolutely perfectly, would they be relatable at all? Would you feel inspired by them? Would you feel motivated? Would you feel human around them? Chances are you wouldn't. And there is the paradox and the lie. When we are thinking that we have to be perfect, it's really behind this thought that we will be more acceptable. We will be socially acclaimed for being perfect. But the truth is it creates more distance. I'm going to say that again. We think that perfectionism will bring us into society further, but really what it does is it creates more distance. Because no one can relate to perfection. Really, truly. You can't relate to perfection because you are not perfect yourself. And so when someone seems perfect and we strive for that, I want you to really gut check. When you see someone, you're like, man, they just have it all together. Everything must be perfect. Gut check why you're following them or why you're inspired by them. Chances are it's not because they actually are perfect. Chances are it's because you know something about their life that wasn't perfect and then they overcame it. So when we are striving for perfectionism in our own lives, it creates that distance. And here's why and how it creates that distance. One, in a one-to-one or one-to-many level, it does not help your relationships. It creates that distance and it builds barriers. Because if you are striving so hard for perfection, it seems unattainable. And other people think you are unapproachable. Because you're going for something that's unattainable and then it's just unapproachable. Right? So your relationships suffer. Now think of it this way. If you are a leader in your life, whether that's in the workplace or even as a parent, and you are striving constantly for perfection, what does that teach in a relationship capacity to the people who you lead? What does that teach your team members? It teaches them that they have to be perfect and high-strung and striving for the unattainable all the time. And if they're not, they could lose their job. That's the image you are projecting. Now, in a family setting, if mom has to have everything be absolutely perfect and she's wound tight and she's full of anxiety all the time and she's angry and snapping at the kids, what does that teach the kids? Two ways it can go there. One, they become the exact same. Is that the life you want for your children? Or two, they become the exact opposite and they strive for nothing because they saw the pain that that life brought you. And you don't want that either. You don't want your children not to strive and progress and be successful. So we have to find that fine balance, right? Swinging back and forth from perfectionism to doing nothing and building those relationships in between where it's like, yes, we are striving for progress. We are striving to learn and to grow and to not be stagnant. But that is not wrapped in a bundle of perfectionism. Because the second that happens, it changes the dynamic of everything. And it creates those barriers, those walls, that distance in your relationships. Here's the other thing with perfectionism. It creates a relationship with yourself that's really hard to come back from. Not impossible, but hard to come back from. And I mean this in every sense. Once we start striving for perfectionism in our own lives, but specifically in our own body and in our own mind, towards ourselves, the phrase, "I'm not good enough," starts to really seep in. We start to abuse ourselves. And I don't mean necessarily physical abuse, although striving for perfectionism is usually a beginning point for especially body perfectionism, body dysmorphia, and anorexia and bulimia, and eating, all these eating disorders and ways of trying to perfect your body, because mentally you're telling yourself you're not good enough the way you are. And that causes barriers and walls inside yourself. That leads to depression. That leads to this constant need and desire to prove that you are good enough. But the thing is you'll never be good enough through perfectionism as you are if you can tell yourself you are good enough, and it's okay if it's not perfect. And here's the big picture of this. You know me by now. I'm a very driven, type A individual. I struggled with perfectionism, and sometimes I still do. But the time frame where I was able to take my mind out of this constant fear and struggle of not being good enough, which it was constant, this anxiety, this anger-riddled life because someone was going to find out that I wasn't perfect, and then my whole world would shatter around me. When I could start to shift that mindset to progress over perfection, start moving into these things that don't have to be perfect, but they are good, and they can always be improved upon as long as I'm learning and growing. Once I started to tell myself I was good enough, things really started to shift. My relationship with myself completely transformed. I became my own best friend instead of my own worst enemy. Now imagine the difference that would make in your life. If you could go from being your own worst enemy and beating the crap out of yourself mentally all the time to being your own best friend and uplifting and empowering and inspiring yourself all the time, that's a game changer. And then the relationships all started to mend and come back together. I could connect with people on completely different levels that I never could before, because I wasn't afraid to show I wasn't perfect. And I wasn't afraid to show that I was trying. Perfectionism has a piece of that too. We don't really want to show we're trying. We want to show that it came to us easy because we're perfect. And if we're trying and we fail, then that's not perfection, and that's a problem. The truth is, you could try and fail a million times, and that's still better than someone who's stuck in perfectionism not trying. You are learning and growing, progressing, and loving yourself and your life along the way, and having relationships and loving others too. Setting an example for your children or for your teams. The perfectionism is not the end-all be-all. It is not the way to a happy life. And again, this is not me saying, don't stop striving and driving for more. That would be completely out of character for me. I do continually strive for progress and for more in my life. But I don't do it with this mindset that if I don't get it perfectly, a hole in one every single time, that I'm less than or unworthy. And I really want to share that with you. But perfectionism will hold you back, specifically from relationships with yourself and with others. It will hold you back from your best life. So that said, I'm going to leave you with that today. I really want you to think about and evaluate and challenge your existing beliefs. Explore whether or not you're your own worst enemy or your own best friend. And then tune in tomorrow when we'll talk about more perfectionism and how to potentially shift that mindset over time so you can be happier in your life. In the meantime, if this episode resonated with you or you think it can help someone else, please share it, rate, review, or subscribe on your listening podcast platform of choice. And above everything else, remember, you are capable of happiness abound.